Hello everyone, welcome to another video tutorial on the CodeAngle YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to create a text to image application by making use of Angular 17 and the Clipdrop API. So as you can see in this project, from the landing page, you can see we have a picture of a cat. This cat image serves as a placeholder before any text is entered into this input field. So for us to see this in action, what we need to do is to enter a text into this input field, click on the send button, and then our dynamic image, which is related to the text we entered, is going to be generated in place of this cat's placeholder image. So without wasting much time, let's test that in action. So the first thing I'm going to search for to show an example of this project is probably I'll search for Homelander from the Boys series, which I watched recently. So let's see what gets generated in the image below. As you can see, we get a representation of the Homelander character, although this looks like an animated version of the character. So another example probably I can show is probably to search for the football club I support, which is Newcastle United. Let's click on send and let's see the result. As you can see, we get a representation of the Newcastle United football club jersey. Also, this image is kind of animated as well. So this is the project we are going to be building today, and the Clipdrop API is going to help us achieve this. So this project may look simple to you, but actually when you look at the Clipdrop API documentation and under the text to image section, when I click on the JavaScript example, you can see that the response gotten from the API is not an array of JSON, which is what we normally get from most of the APIs I've worked with personally. But this time around, we are getting array buffer. So this may be a bit tricky when you are trying to handle this in Angular. So if you are wondering what the array buffer is, when you check the MDN documentation, you can see the array buffer is like an object used to represent a generic raw binary data buffer. So I'm going to drop the link to this documentation in the description box. But the way we are going to go about this is to convert the response to a unit 8 array, which you can see it's a typed array that represents an array of 8 bits unsigned integers. So after converting the data gotten from the Clipdrop API into an unit 8 array, the next thing we're going to do is to convert it into a base 64 string. And then when we do this, we would need to make some construction of the response gotten from the API, and that is where the security provided by Angular, the security API provided by Angular, which is called the bypass security trust URL, come into play. So we need to sanitize the URL because we are trying to construct the URL, and while constructing the URL, there are potentially dangerous and malicious vulnerability that can come into play during this process. So that's why we need to make use of the DomSanitizer API provided by Angular. So after that, then we now combine and construct the URL to generate our image. So that is what we are going to build today. And if you are new to the channel, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. And with that, let's get started with the tutorial. Quick pause. Recently, I partnered with Newline to create a new online course focusing on Angular signals. As you all know, signals is the new rave of the moment when it comes to the world of Angular. In this course, you learn how to surgically manage states and optimize UI rendering with Angular signals. Also in this course, you get to learn how to manage states in an Angular application by making use of signals. You get to learn the importance of using signals to enhance change detection, how to integrate a robust lazy loading approach by making use of deferrable views and lazy loaded routes, differentiate between using RxJS and signals when working with data and asynchronous operations. You also learn how to structure an Angular application using standalone components, and also how to work with the newly built-in control flows in Angular. At the end of this course, you get to build a modern shopping cart application, as you can see on the slider on this page. Also, you can get to preview the course contents in this course by checking out the course syllabus. You can see we have 5 intense modules, starting with the introduction, then we gradually move down to getting started with signals, and after that we work with signals and HTTP requests and how to share data between different components with signals. At the end of the day, we wrap everything we've done so far in the last module of the course, and you can get this course for a fair price of 39 USD for a one-time fee. And by purchasing this course, you have additional benefits such as a dedicated Discord community where if you have any issues or any questions around the course, I'll be sure to answer you personally on that. And also you have access to full transcripts. Also, you have money back guarantee in case you want to not purchase the course anymore, which I'm sure you are not going to do. So if you are looking for a quality resource on signals in Angular, this is the #1 course I would recommend you to get. You can purchase it for yourself and also purchase it for your friends who are in the Angular community looking to upgrade on their signals knowledge. You can see the link to this course in the description box below on YouTube. And with that, let's head back to the tutorial. So to get started with this project, I'm going to do what I normally do in every tutorial. I'm going to start from scratch, and at the end of the tutorial, the link to the GitHub repository will be available in the description box. So I'm going to make use of the ng-new command and then the name of our project to create a new Angular project, which we are going to call ng text to image, and then I'm going to click on enter. So we are going to answer, I think, a couple of prompts. This is an Angular 17 project, so we have access to all the latest syntax and functionalities provided by the Angular team, like signals and all, for this tutorial. So the first prompt is asking us the style sheet formats we want. This is a simple project, so I'm just going to select CSS, and then it's asking us if we want server-side generation or pre-rendering. We don't need that, so I'm going to select no, and I'm going to click on enter, and with that, the new project starts getting generated for us. So while this is happening, I would like to go to the Clipdrop documentation to set it up. That is the Clipdrop website, to set up the account so that we can see how to generate our API key. So going back to the browser, under the Clipdrop documentation, you should go to accounts if you don't have an account. So once you create an account, you need to verify the account using a phone number. So once you verify your account with a phone number, which will be sent, I think a code will be sent to the phone number, and then once it's verified, I don't want to repeat that process, so that's why I'm not going through that step, but that's what you have to do if you want to make use of the Clipdrop API. So once the account is set up, then you'll be provided with a profile page which contains your user ID and your email address, which is visible on the page. Then you'll be assigned 100 credits by default. If you want more credits, you are free to purchase more credits, as you can see in the button right here. And you should also know this is not a sponsored video. I just came across the API and I liked what I saw from their API. So once you see the credits, the credits start reducing as you make more requests. Currently I'm on 88 credits, obviously, because I've been testing out the API. And then you are provided with the API key. So if you want to see your API key, which you should always keep secrets, for me, I'm going to click on the reveal API key, and as you can see the API key right here, I'm going to revoke it after this tutorial, so you shouldn't bother trying to copy out or write down this API key. So we're going to integrate this API key into our Angular project once the compilation is complete. For some reason, while our Angular project is getting installed, some error came up. So if you find yourself in this kind of situation, one thing you can do is just to navigate into the project directory and then run npm install, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to say cd, I think we call the project ng text to image, and then since we are now in the Angular project directory, I can just run npm install. So any package that was not installed while the error was coming up is going to get installed. So that's one way to go about it anytime you are trying to generate a new Angular project and probably an error occurs. I don't know why this error occurred. Probably my internet wasn't stable or something. So once npm install is run now, I think all the packages should now be installed and the project should be ready. As you can see, the installation is complete, and whatever issues the project might have is going to get fixed now. So before we open the project up in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to clear everything we have right here, and then I like to generate two folders. One is the service folder and the second one is the environmental variables folder. So let's go with the first one. I can just say ng generate environment. This will help us generate the environmental folder where we store our REST API, and then the service. So I can just say ng generate service, and then it's going to be in a service folder, and we're going to call it text to image. So I'm going to press enter, and as you can see, the two folders have been generated for us. Perfect. So we can now proceed with the opening of the project inside of Visual Studio Code, and the command to do that is just to type in code and dots and press enter. So our new project will get opened in Visual Studio Code, as we can see right here. So I'm going to increase the font a little bit so we can see things much more clearly. So like any other normal Angular projects, most of the work is done inside the app directory. So within the app directory, you can see we have the service folder and the environment folder. So the first thing I would like to do is to configure the base URL and the API key. So this is the environment.development folder, or file rather. So for this one, we're going to set production as false. So I'm just going to say production, set it false, and then the base URL, we're going to grab that from Clipdrop in a moment, as well as the API key. So let's quickly do that. So quickly, let's head back to the documentation, and in the docs under text to image, I'm going to scroll down. You can see the base URL. So I'm going to grab it, which is clipdrop-api.co/test-2-image/version1 or v1, as you may want to call it. So once we have that ready, the API key, I already grabbed that. So I'm just going to copy let me make this key uppercase, and I'm just going to paste that within the key we have right here. So I think we now have the base URL and the API key. So we are good to go to set this up in the service. But before we set it up in the service, we need to go to the app.config.ts file. And this is where we need to configure the provide HTTP clients, because we need to make use of the HTTP clients to fetch data from the REST API. It's a mechanism Angular uses to communicate with REST API. So we need to configure it in this app.config.ts file. So to do that, we need to import it. So after this provider route, we don't need routing in this project. So I'm just going to leave it anyways. So I'm just going to say provide HTTP clients. As you can see, it has been automatically imported for us above. So with this, we are good to go to make use of the HTTP clients in our service, which is the next thing we need to do. We need to configure the text to image API in our Angular service. So quickly, I head straight to the service folder, and within the service file, we need to, I'm going to get rid of the constructor, because we are going to make use of the inject function inside of the constructor to define our dependency injection for the HTTP client. So let's do that right now. So I can just say private HTTP client is equals to inject. So the new Angular 17 allows us to configure our HTTP client this way by making use of the inject function. So as you can see, HTTP client is imported above. We need to import inject as well. So inject is also imported at Angular/core. So with that imported, we need to import our environment as well. But probably as we create our function, we need one function to fetch the text to image API. So that's what we need to do next. So I'm just going to create the function by saying text to image, and then I'm going to open a parenthesis, and then it's going to take in an argument, so, or a parameter. So it's going to be data. I'm going to give it a type of any, because in the documentation we don't know how our response is going to come or whatever shape is going to take. So that's why we are giving it a type of any. And if I take a look at the response and how the API is configured, if I click on JavaScript implementation, you can see we are going to make use of headers to implement this. So what that means is, let's create our headers variable. So I'm just going to say const headers is equals to new HTTP header, new HTTP headers dot set. So this dot set is going to take in two arguments. So the first one is going to be the name of the key for the API key. So from the documentation, we can see is named as X API key. So I'm just going to grab this X API, so italics, and then we're now going to import the real API key. So I'm going to make use of backticks right here, and then the $, and I'm going to call environment dot API key. So that's the first step for our implementation. We've been able to set up the headers, and if you scroll up, you can see we've imported environment, and that's why we have access to this API key. So the next step is to return the HTTP client so that we know the type of HTTP method we are going to make use of, and in this case it's going to be a post request. So I'm just going to say return this dot HTTP client dot post, and then we're gonna call the base URL. So I'm gonna make use of backticks again, $sign, and then the curly braces, and I'm gonna say environment.base URL. So after calling the base URL, we need to make use of the endpoints. So back to the documentation. Which endpoint are we making use of? We're making use of the text to image endpoint. So I think I might have copied the entire URL from here. So the API starts and ends here, while the endpoint is starts and ends here. So I'm gonna head back to the environment variable, and I'm gonna cut this text -2 image /vi, and then I'm gonna save, close the app.config, and then over here I'm just gonna apply the /text to image /v1. That means version 1 of the API. I guess other updates will be made as time goes by. Then I'm gonna pass in the data, and then pass in the headers as well. So the headers is going to be inside a curly brace. So I'm just gonna say headers, and then I'm gonna put in within the header curly brace the response type. By default, usually I think if it's returning an array of JSON, like if it's returning a JSON, you probably don't need to determine the response type. But this time around, we are dealing with array buffer, because when you check the REST API, we have array buffer. It's returning response.array buffer. So we need to let Angular know that we are returning an array buffer response type. So I'm just gonna say response type : and then pass in array buffer. So that's all we need to do to configure our service function. So with this, we can integrate it within our app component HTML and app component CS file. So I know Angular usually generates boilerplate, so which I'm going to clear everything. We don't need to make use of the router, so I'm just going to get rid of the router outlet tag as well. So I'm just going to save, and then probably type in hello world and run. Let's compile our project for the first time to see if the project is going to compile successfully. And as you can see, the compilation is now complete. So let's head to the browser, and as you can see on localhost 4200, we have the hello world text on the page. So the next thing I want to do is to configure the simple UI, which contains the input field, and I'm going to make use of Bootstrap 5 to do that. So quickly, let's search for Bootstrap on the browser, and I'm going to grab the CDN CSS link and head straight to the index.html file, and within the head section we can just have our link right here. With this, we now have access to CSS. So in the app component HTML file, I'm going to get rid of the h1 word. Let's have a container and a form as well as input field. So to do that, all I need to do is create a div, and then let's give it a class of container, and then another class of margin top of 5, because I want spacing to be at the top. And then the next div I want to create is going to have a class of mb-3, and then within that we're going to have our form. So I'm just going to type in the form tag. We are not going to make use of action attributes. Everything is going to be handled through the forms module in Angular. So next step is the input tag. So it's going to be a type of text, and it's going to have a class of form control available in Bootstrap 5, and then I'm going to press enter. So and see input type of text, class of form control, and another input field is going to be created. So this is going to be an input type attribute of submit. So this is like our button, but we are using an input tag to create a button. So I'm just going to say margin top, I'm gonna give it 3, and then change the text to submit, and then also the value is going to be called let's call it send. I'm just gonna say send. So that's our send button right there. I think that's all we need to do for now, and somewhere within, probably here, we're gonna have our image. So let me just leave a comment right here that says image section. So when we're about to configure the image, we just create the image div section right there, which will contain the img tag. But in the meantime, let's just save and see how our browser looks like rather. So in the browser, you can see we have this nice input field, and it has a send button. So with that, we can now proceed to the next step, which is to configure the form. Let's go to the app component CS file and then import the forms module. So within the import array, I'm just going to add comma and then type in forms module. Or as you can see, the forms module is imported above. So we're good to go with that. So back in the HTML file, you know what, let's just continue our implementation in the app component CS file. So the next step to fetch the data for the REST API is to create a function called on submit. So I'm just going to call this function of submit, and it's going to have a an argument of form and it's gonna be ng form. So with this, we are able to get the value of our form. We need to import this ng form as well. So if you scroll up, you can see ng form imported in the forms module package. Now within the onSubmit method, we need to create a variable because the configuration for the REST API expects a form data. Going back to documentation, you can see we have form data, and then we get to append a key which is called prompt, and then the name, that is anything we type within the input field. So we have a key and then a value. So that's what the form dot append allows us to do. It gives us the ability to have the first argument, which is going to call the key, and here the key is called prompt, and then the value, which is going to be whatever we type within the input field. So let's configure that in Angular right here. So I can just say let form data is equals to new form data. So new form data, and then down below we can now say form data dot append, and then we need to pass in the key, which has to be in sync with what the API expects, which is called prompt, and then we need to now pass in the value coming from the input field. So in this case, we're going to say form dot value dot text. So with that, we get to send whatever we type within this input field to the REST API. I'm going to console log the form dot value dot text, so to see anytime we want to submit the form. So I'm just going to copy this and just paste it within the console, so we see whatever we are typing. So now we can now work with the text service, so the text to image service. So probably before we do that, let's complete the integration of our form. So in the app.html file, I'm just going to go to the form tag. I'm going to make use of a template reference and call text form, and it's going to be is equals to ng form, and then I'm going to make use of the ng submit event handler, and then I'm going to call the method we created, which called onSubmit, and then pass in the text form. So I'm just going to grab this text form and paste it right there. So within the input tag we have right here, I'm going to pass in ng model, which is required for the directive in our forms module. And I think with that, our configuration for our form is submit. So anytime I click on the send, then whatever value we are logging into this console is going to show in the console. So let's see if that works out. So I've saved everything we've done so far. So I'm going to inspect elements, and within the console, since we have an error somewhere, it says if ng model is used within a form tag, either the name attribute must be set or the form control must be defined as standalone. So we need to set the name attribute. So back to our form, I'm going to enter the name attribute. So I'm going to say name is equals to text. So I'm going to save that, and as you can see, the error is gone. So let's just type a random string and then press send. You can see we now have the value which we are console logging in app.component.ts on line 19. As you can see on line 19 right here, that means every value within that form, we now have access to it, and we're able to send it as a payload to the REST API, which is cool. So now we are heading to the final stretch of this tutorial, which is to integrate this service. So without wasting much time, let's just call the service. But before that, we need to make use of the inject function. So using the inject function, we can just say private text to image service. I didn't spell that. Is equals to inject, and then we need to call text to image service. Okay, I just say text to image service, and then let's import, making use of IntelliSense. And as you can see, we have text to image service imported for us, and I need to import the inject function as well. And another thing we need to do is inject the sanitizer, but for now we don't need to do that. So within the function, I can just say this dot text to image service dot text to image, which is the method in our service. If I go back to the service, you can see we have text to image, which is what we are referencing. So I'm just gonna close this right here, the CSS file. So we are now referencing the text to image, and then it expects a payload. So the payload is the form data. So I'm just gonna pass in the form data, and then I'm gonna say dot subscribe, and we're gonna make use of two observers actually. Next, which handles when the request is successful, and then the error observer, which helps us handle when the request is there's an error in the request. So I'm just going to open a bracket, and within this bracket we can just say next, and then make use of a colon, and make use of an arrow function, passing an argument of rest, and make use of curly braces. So within the next, let's console log the next response. So we're going to console log response, and then we can now deal with the error observer. I can just say error and make use of the colon, passing the error, and then this time around we can make use of alerts and then pass in the error. So I think that's all we need to do actually to undo the request before we now deal with trying to make use of unit 8 array and typed array to undo the image and then construct the image making use of the dump sanitizer and the bypass security trust URL and all. So quickly let's just test this out and see what we get in the console. So I'm just going to type in web development and then let's click on send. Let's see if we get any response. In the network, you can see the request is getting sent and we get an array buffer. You can see the response from the array buffer. This doesn't make any sense because it's coming in form of an array buffer, which is in form of unit 8 array and the likes. So if I extend this, you can see the various configurations returned. We have byte length, we have detached, we have max byte length and things like that. So for this to make sense, we need to construct this, and that's what we have to do next. So back in the Visual Studio Code, the first variable I'm going to create called type array. So I'm going to say let's typed underscore array is equals to new uint 8 array, and then we're going to pass in the response which we are getting from the REST API. So next up, we need to create another array again. So this time around, we need to create another variable rather. So this time around, I'm going to try to create the character for the strings. So I'm just going to say const string underscore char is equals to, then we reference the typed array which we just created above. Then we make use of the reduce method. So with the reduce method, we get to section the data into the byte and then the data. So what do I mean by this? I'm just going to say dot reduce and then we're going to say data and then bytes. Then we make use of the fat arrow, open a curly bracket, and then we try to return the data, and then so we concatenate the data with string dots from char code, which is a method that converts Unicode values to characters. So all we have to do is just say string dot from char code and then we pass in the bytes. So reduce expect an initial value which is going to be an empty string, as you can see right here. So that's the last argument the reduce method expects. Next up, we need to create the variable that handles the base 64 string. So to do that, we can create a variable called base 64 string. So we can just say let's base 64 string is equals to b tau and then pass in the string char. If you are wondering what the btao stands for, so basically this is a global function or method that creates a base 64 string, and then you can use it to encode data which may otherwise cause communication problems and transmit it. All these data, all these links I'll be dropping in the description box so you can go through it during your own time and understand how this basically works. So it's a global function, so I'll drop the link like I said. So with this, we can now proceed to the final step, which is the construction of the URL. So we need to create a variable called image URL. So right above, I'm just gonna create a variable called image URL, and then it's going to be a type of safe URL. So we need to import that as well, and I think this needs an initializer. That's why we have that error. So let's scroll back to the bottom of function. So below the base 64 string, I can just say this dot image URL is equals to this dot sanitizer, which we need to create using the inject method rather. So right below here, I can just say private sanitizer. This helps us to sanitize our URL, which I explained earlier in the tutorial. So I can just say sanitizer is equals to inject and then pass in the DomSanitizer. So if I scroll to top, you can see the DomSanitizer, you can see the safe URL, all imported from @angular4/platform browser. So we can now say this dot sanitizer dot, then we make use of the, you can see all these particular resources available to us. All these are available in the Angular documentation, which I explained right here, but the one we need for this context is this bypass security trust URL because we're trying to deal with this URL construction. So I'm just gonna say dot bypass security trust URL, and then we need to do the construction within this method. So I'm gonna open up a string and I'm gonna say data, then make use of colon, pass in the image /jpg, and then make use of a colon and then pass in base 64, and then we're gonna concatenate this string by saying base 64 string. So with this, we've been able to construct our image URL, and we can now pass this image URL into an image tag in our HTML file. Yeah. So I would like to console log this dots image URL right here. So I can just say, so for us to see how it looks in the browser, so we can just say this dots image URL. I'm gonna save that, and before we test it out, I need to configure the image tag. So I'm gonna open up a div tag, and within this div tag, I'm going to make use of the @if and @else block, which are new syntaxes available in Angular 17. So what I'm going to do here is, if the image URL exists, then it's going to show, when you click on the send, it's going to show the image URL if it exists. If it doesn't exist, then I'm going to replace it with the placeholder cat image. So what do I mean by this? Let's see this in action. So I'm just going to say if, and then I'm going to pass in the image URL. So I'm going to say image, that is, if image URL exists, then I want to show this image tag. So within the image tag, I'm going to bind, making use of the square brackets, and then I'm going to bind it to the image URL, which holds the URL of our image, which we just struck. So the alt tag, probably we might just say generated image, and then we now need to make use of the else block. So I can just say @else, that is, if the image URL doesn't exist, then help us display this cat image. So I'm just gonna say https://place kitten. So it's actually a kitten.com / the size, which is 640 by 360, and then for the alt attributes, I can just say kitten. This is in case the image does not show. It helps with accessibility. So I'm gonna save, and we can now test out this application. I think that's all the integrations. So heading to the browser, as you can see, we have our kitten showing. So I'm just gonna search for probably this time another character from The Boys. Let's go for Billy Butcher. So I'm gonna search for Billy Butcher, then spell but well. Okay, let's see Billy Butcher, and let's see the response for this, and we get an error. Says changing this break application security for the safe URL. Okay, invalid URL. So the URL is not valid. So basically, we might have made an error somewhere while URL. So let's head back to the CS file and see what could be wrong. So I think it could be from here, data : image /jpg. Okay, I think we need a comma here. We didn't add a comma, so I'm gonna save once more, and then let's refresh the page, and once again let's search for Billy Butcher, and then click on send. And this time around, oh dear Lord, what is this? This doesn't look like Billy Butcher from The Boys. Anyways, we are now getting a safe URL response. And as you can see, this is the string being displayed within our image tag. As you can see it right here, which we are logging in the console. So we've been able to convert the array buffer into a safe URL. So let's search for one more character. This time around, let's go for Annie January. So let's say Annie January. Let's see if this character actually has an image that looks something like her. Oh well, we get another animation. I don't know. Let's search for something relating to web development, and then we call it a day. So I'm gonna search for JavaScript. No, let's search for Angular. I mean, we're working with Angular, why not Angular? So let's search for Angular and see what it returns. There you go. I don't know, does this look like the Angular logo? I'm not too sure. Anyways, that's it for this tutorial. So you can just improve upon this project, probably include a loader because the response seems a bit slow while being fetched from the Clipdrop API. So anyways, that's it for this tutorial. If you are new to the channel, if you enjoyed the tutorial, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and with that, I'll see you again in the next one. Thank you.